In this video, we're just going to get some practice using our z-scores along with our z-tables to talk about the area under our normal curve. So if you don't have your z-tables, there should be a link right above this that has those available. I would recommend having that either next to you or print it off so that you can follow along, because it's going to be really helpful to have something that you can reference. So when we're looking for the area corresponding to these different z-scores, you're always going to need, first of all, the z-score itself, and then something that describes the area that we're talking about. So in this case, find the area to the left of z equals negative 1.37. Now, I always recommend drawing out a picture. I think it's really helpful, in particular for the types of problems that we're going to see later on, because it'll help us to know if we have to do a little bit of extra work at the end of our problem. So if I was to sketch this out, z-scores really only make sense to talk about on our normal curve. So here's a rough normal curve, and I want to talk about z-scores, which means this is the standard normal curve. On a standard normal curve, the mean is always 0 and the standard deviation is 1. So if I wanted to talk about the mean and the standard deviation from this distribution, the mean is 0, standard deviation is 1. So z equals negative 1.37. I'll be honest, my pictures are never super detailed. All I care about is that I end up on the correct side of the mean. So if 0 lives right here in the middle, then negative 1.37, well, that's just going to live somewhere over here on the left. So let's go ahead and say here's negative 1.37. That's the z-score that I want to talk about. And this says find the area, we said, to the left of this z-score. So I'm going to be looking at this area right here. So I already have the z-score of negative 1.37, which is super handy. I now, if I want to find the area to the left of that, I'm going to have to use my z-tables. So I'm going to hop on over to my z-tables, which look a little something like this, and they can look quite intimidating at first, but let's talk about these. And actually, let me write down my z-score just so that I don't forget it. We said z equals negative 1.37. Okay, so a few things to note. First of all, when we look at these, all of these areas in the middle, this big section right here, these numbers represent the area. And the important thing, perhaps the most important thing we can remember about our normal tables, our z-tables, is that this only tells us area to the left. This only tells us area to the left. So if we wanted something like area to the right, we're going to have to do just a little bit of extra work and be a little bit creative about how we're going to find that. So when we look at these, one side of your z-table, it should have two sides to it. One side is going to have negative z-scores, which here I can tell here are my negative z-scores right here. And if you flip it over, you should have the positive z-score. So if I scroll down to the next page, here we're going to have our positive z-scores. You'll notice these guys over here are all positive. When we look at our table, I'm going to scroll back to my negative case right here. When we look at our table, we need to determine just a couple things. I'm going to start by looking at just this part of my z-score, negative 1.3. So on either the left or the right side, depending on whether we have a negative or a positive z-score, the left side, or excuse me, the right side in this case, is going to tell me the first number and the first decimal point of my z-score. So I'm looking for negative 1.3, which is this guy right here, negative 1.3. So I'm going to start by turning my attention to this row right here. Here's negative 1.3. To determine the second decimal, I'm going to be looking at the top. So these numbers up here tell me the second number of my z-score. So our second number was 7. So we're going to be looking at, our second number was 7. We're going to be looking at this column right here. So I'm going to highlight that column because that represented my second decimal. And really I should be highlighting all of these, but what I would want to look at then is the intersection between the row that I've highlighted down here and the column that I've highlighted over here. So in this case, I can look at the intersection between those two, and I know that the area to the left of z equals negative 1.37, would be 0.0853. So the answer to that question, I don't have really any calculation to do. It's just 0.0853. So let me go ahead and write that down before I forget that number. So this area right here is 0.0853. There is my answer. So if you have the z-score already, and if we're looking for the area to the left, it's just a matter of looking our value up in our table. Now, if we want to talk about, in this case, the area to the right of a z-score, we do have just a little bit more work, but I'm gonna draw my picture first before we start to think about that. So I'm going to draw my normal curve. Standard normal curve means the mean is 0. So my z-score that I'm working with in this problem is a positive 2.09, which means that that data value lives somewhere over here on the right. I don't necessarily care about how far to the right. I'm not going to be super detailed. I just want something that'll give me an idea of what I'm looking at. So we've got 2.09 right here. And we want the area to the right, which means I'm looking at this area in my normal distribution this time around. So I would like to know, what is this area? So 2.09, let's go back and look at our z-table. So okay, we've got 2.09. And it's a positive 2.09. So I'm going to scroll down and look at my positive z-scores. We said z equals 2.09. So I'm going to look for, again, I'm just going to look for positive 2.09. However, I am going to have a slight issue this time in that even if I'm working with positive z-scores, it still only tells me area to the left. No matter what, this table only tells me area to the left. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So positive 2.09. Let me zoom out a little bit so we can see. So first of all, 2.0, I'm going to start with this part, 2.0. So here is 2.0. I'm looking at this row. So let's go ahead and highlight it. 2.0, this is the row that I'm looking at. And then the second decimal place is 9, which means I'm going to be looking all the way over here at this column on the far right. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that column right there, and I'm going to look at the intersection between those two, and I find that the area to the left of that number is 0.9817. So that's the area to the left, so 0.9817. Let me take that number back. So this area is 0.9817. However, that's not the area that I wanted. I clearly highlighted the area to the right. Well, I can use what I know about complements and the fact that the entire area under this curve has to be 1. So if I wanted to find the area to the right, I'm just going to find the complement of this probability, 0.9817. So 1 minus 0.9817. Let's make sure I don't make a silly mistake. 0.9817 gives me 0.0183. There's my answer. So if I want to find the area to the right, it's not too terribly difficult because I just need to subtract the area to the left from 1. So I want 1 minus area to the left. Very good. Let's talk about the last case, which is the most complicated, but let's take it one step at a time. So now, in this case, in part C, I want to find the area between z equals negative 0.27 and z equals 1.46. So if I wanted to talk about this, again, I'm going to draw myself a picture here real quick just so that I can see what I'm looking at. Here's my mean of 0 right in the middle. This time I've got two z-scores to talk about. I want to talk about the area between negative 0.27. So first of all, it's a negative z-score, which means it lives somewhere over here on the left-hand side. So here's negative 0.27. And then I want to talk about a positive 1.46. So perhaps it's over here, positive 1.46. And I would like to find the area between these two values, which means I'm looking for the area in the middle right here, which seems perhaps a little bit more difficult, and it is a little bit, it's a couple extra steps that we're going to have to do, but we can still use the same tools that we've been using. We can still use our z-table to answer this question. What I'm going to think about is I'm going to start by saying, hey, let me just copy this real quick. This area that I have right here, it looks pretty similar to the entire area to the left of 1.46. So again, I'm going to circle this in red. This on the left is what I actually want. That's what I'm trying to find. And I say, well, that looks kind of like this, except this area is too big. But it at least gives us a starting point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by finding the area to the left of positive 1.46. So let's hop back to my z table, positive 1.46, and let's erase some of this just so that we don't get mixed up. So we said our z-score this time around, our z-score is positive 1.46, and we can zoom in a little bit. So first of all, first number, first decimal, 1.4, which means we're looking at this row right here. So let's go ahead and highlight that. And then the second decimal is going to be 6. So we're looking at this column right here. And we're going to highlight that. The intersection between those two would be 0.9279. So I know the area to the left of 1.46 is this 0.9279. So let's hop back. So this area is 0.9279. However, that's not quite what I want because that's actually too big. It's finding this area right here. So I need to find a way to subtract that. Well, I can find that area. I can just say, well, let's go find the area to the left of negative 0.27. If I find the area to the left of this number, then I can just subtract those two areas and it'll only leave me with the area in the middle, which is what I want. So let's look up negative 0.27 in my z-tables one last time. So hopping back to my z-tables, I'm going to have to look at my negative z-tables. So looking at this right here, let's erase just so that we can start fresh. And we said this time around our z-score was 0.27. Actually, let me double check because I already forgot. Negative 0.27, yes. Okay. So let's hop back here. My z-score is negative 0.27. So my first decimal would be negative 0.2. I'm going to have to zoom out just a little bit here. Here down towards the bottom, here is negative 0.2. So I know that this is the row that I'm looking at. And then the second decimal place is a 7. So we're going to be looking at this column right here. So the intersection between that row and that column, I have 0.3936 is the area to the left. So 0.3936. So this area here in blue, 0.3936. So to finish this problem up, I have one last step. I said, okay, well, this area to the left of 1.46, that's too big. I should subtract the area that I don't want, which is 0.3936. So to find this area, I want 0.9279 minus 0.3936. And if I grab my calculator to finish this up, 9279 minus 0.3936, that gives me 0.5343. So here is our area in between.